We're on Daf Lamed Beis, and we're up to Kol Parsha Kula, which you'll see approximately, let's just see, 5 lines down from the top. Let's just see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down from the top of the parsha of the page. HaParsha Kula Nemra ala Seder Chutz mi Pasuk Zeh. The verses in the parsha here in Vayikra Tezayin in Achremos reflect the sequence, the chronological sequence of all the avodos, except for one pasuk. And one pasuk is wedged in between two avodos when that pasuk reflects on an avodah that's going to take place later. So let's take a look in the parsha. Again, if you have a chumash, it'll be much more meaningful. And the parsha describes the avodas ha-Kohen Gadol in the big day Lavan, in his Michnasei Bad, big day Bad, and he did the avoda of the Seirim. Now we're up to pasuk Chaf Gimel, and this pasuk is the pasuk that immediately follows the Torah's recording of the avodas HaSeirim. And we're going to take a look at the sequence of Psukim Chaf Gimel and Chaf Dalet. Now, in terms of the Soyer Achai, the Torah had told us earlier that he needs the Hazos, the Hiza Olav Ben Adam B'Etzvo, that's in Psukim Yutes, Yud and Chaf Aleph. All right, Chaf Aleph already goes on to the Soyer Mishtaleach. And now it says in Pasuk of Gimel, Uba Aaron el Oel Moed, Upashad es Bigdei Abad, Asher Lovash, Biboel HaKodesh, B'nicham Sham. Now this Pasuk is describing the end of the day. In other words, as we discussed earlier today in our introductory shir, the Ba'aron Elo Moed is the last entry of the Kohen Gadol of Aaron into the Kodesh Kodashim at the end of the day for purposes of removing the Kafu Machta. And that's when he's going to take off his big day bad for the last time after he finishes with that avoda. And he's going to be ready to go back to the Avodas Hayom, or he's ended the Avodas Hayom. And then Pasuk of Dalet goes backwards. V'rochatz es besora b'mayim b'makom kadosh, v'lavash es b'gadav, v'yotza v'yos es olasa v'yos olas ha'am. He's now taking off his big day Lavan to wear his big day Zav for the purpose of the Ola for the Kohen and the Ola for the Am. He's in the very thick, very involved very much in the Avodas HaKarbanos. Not Lifnim, but Bachutz. So what's this Pasuk of Gimel wedged in the middle here of Uba Aaron al Ol Moed? I mean, that we're not ready for that. That's describing the end of the day. I mean, the next pasuk of Dalet, it takes me Lamafrei, it takes me retroactively back to the avodas of the day. So it's almost as if the Torah took one pasuk and lifted it and put it here, wedging it as it were between the avodas haseirim and the olos of the El Ha'am, the Olas Ha'am and the Olas Olaso. So getting back to our Gemara, it says Haparsha Kula. So the parsha starts with Uba Aaron. Let's go back here to the beginning of the parsha. Where does it say Uba Aaron? Okay, we don't have that pasuk right now. I don't want to. Oh, here it is. Uba Aaron El Moed pasuk of Gimel. And from the beginning of this parsha up until Uba Aaron, everything is ala seder. You can follow the psukim, and they reflect on the sequence of the avodah. Chutz mi pasuk zeh, but when we get to Uba Aaron, which is pasuk of Gimel, hikdimu akasuv, the psuke parsha shelo lefi seder avodos. And the Gemara is going to go into this apparently later on Daf Ayin Aleph. He makes a note here in the name of Abaye. Because after Pasuk of Gimel comes Pasuk of Dalit. So that's the aisle of the Kohen Gadol and the aisle of the Am, of the Tzibur. Now, in the Seder Avodos, that's Avodah number 3. And it was performed while the Kohen was wearing the big Beisah. So basically, what would happen now in the sequence of the Avodah is that this should be indicative of the first time that he goes out of the Kodesh Kodashim in order to do the Avodas Chutz of the aisle Shel Kohen Gadol and the aisle Am. And yet, the Torah wedges in the middle the entry into the Kodesh Kodashim at the end of the day. He says, Al Karchach, what do we derive from this? Kohen Gadol tzarech haya lahafsik al yada bein biasa rishona lifnim lavodas hayom hapnimis levein biasa shnia lifnim lotzas kafu machta. It would seem that the pasuk is telling me that between the first entry into the Kodesh Kodashim for Avodas Pnim and the second time that he goes in for Otzas HaMachta, in between those two, he's got to do the avoda of the Elo V'Ela'am. So I'm going to read that one more time. He says, HaKohen Gadol tzarech haya lahafsik al yada bein biasa rishona lifnim liavodas hayom hapnimis, like for example the Haktoras, levein biasa hashniya lifnim lo tzas hakaf umachta. Nimtzos seder apsukim v'parsha enik is seder avodos. Shari yitzi aso lasias ola olaso v'olas am kodemis lebiaso lahotzi hakafa machta. In other words, when he leaves the Kodesh Kodashim and the Kohen Gadol now does the ola, the olas ha'am, that comes before his entry into the Kodesh Kodashim on the second round for Otzas Kafu Machta, and yet the Torah puts that pasuk of his entry into the Kodesh Kodashim for the purpose of removing the Kafu Machta before the Ola and the Ola Sa'am. The Beseder Apsukim Ksuva Yitzia Achar Abiyah, in other words, pasuk of Dalid, only appears after Pasuk of Gimel, shenemra beretzef echad im shar avodas hapnimios. In other words, this Pasuk of Gimel, uba Aaron el Ol Moed, which is the entry into the Kodesh Kadoshim at the end of the day to take out the kafamachta, is being placed in the psukim as if it's a continuation of whatever he did inside the Kodesh Kadoshim. So it's like almost one continuum, when in truth, the next pasuk of Dalid of V'yatza V'yoles Olaso, that Yitzia from the Kodesh Kadoshim, in truth, precedes the entry into the Kodesh Kadoshim for the purpose of removing the Kafel Machta. So the psukim are out of order, out of sequence. So the Gemara says the following: My timer, ma'atam lekach shetzricho es ha'hefsek hazeh b'emtza avodas hayom. In other words, the Torah apparently is placing this pasuk, which describes what's going to come later, and the Torah is makdim it in order to separate and create a hefsek in the middle of his avodas hayom. Madua hitilu olav avodas chutz. In other words, the Torah is trying to teach us that the avodas chutz, for example, Elo v'Elo Hayam, is between the Ketores and the Azos in the Kodesh Kadoshim and the Otzas HaMachta. So in other words, again, what we're saying is that even though in the sequence of the Psukim, the Otzas HaMachta indicated in Pasuk of Gimel comes before the Yitzia for the Asiyah of the Ola, but nevertheless, in truth, the Asiyah of the Ola comes first. And the Asiyah of the Ola now wedges in between the two avodos, so to speak, avodos, I'm using that as a generic, of the Kodesh Kadoshim. There's the avodah of the Ketores and the Hazos, and then we're going to have the Hotzas Kafu Machto. Within the middle, we're going to have the avodas chutz of Elo V'El Hayam. Omer Rav Chizda, Gemiri. The reason why it has to happen in that sequence, and it cannot be interpreted in the sequence of the psukim, is because we have a Musores, we have a tradition, a halach l'Moshe Sinai, that there are chamesh tvilos, the asara kiddushim tovel kohen gadol u'makadish bo b'yom. We need 5 tvilos, 10 kiddushim. Each tvila requires a kiddush before and a kiddush after. Kiddush meaning the daim raglayim. The Ikesidron, if you're going to read it according to the sequence of the psukim as they appear, lo mishkachas lu el shalosh tvilos v'shisha kiddushim. There'll only be 3 tvilos in the mikvah, each tvila requiring a kiddush night before it and afterwards, which means the number of 6. We don't have 5 and 10. Now, here in my Gemara, he goes through the calculation of why there would only be 3 tvilos and 6 kiddushim. Hainu, he writes tvila rishona, v'kiddush rishon, v'levishas big days of l'tamid shel shachar. So we've got 1 tvila to start the day off with 2 kiddushim, and that's for the purpose of the tamid shel shachar. And all that is to put on the big day zav for the first time in the day. Tvila shniya, and now we're up to kiddush sheni v'shlishi, because again the first kiddush was only 1, based on the shita of Chacham that we discussed at great length. So now he's up to the tvila shniya. B'levishas bigdei lovan lavoda pnimis. So now he's going into the Kodesh Kodashim. He's going to don his bigdei lovan. He's going to be tovel with another two kiddushim, which are the sheni and shlishi. Now we're up to the second tefillah. And inside the Kodesh Kodashim, he's going to do everything. If you take the Seder Psukim as they're written in the Torah, namely, he'll do the Kores, the Hazav, the Dam of the Par, Bein Habadim, and then he'll remove the Kafu Machta. If we go according to the Seder Psukim. Now we're up to Tefillah Shlishis and Kiddush Reviv Chamishi. B'levishas bigdei zah. According to the Seder Psukim, now after he finished everything that he had to do in the Kodesh Kodashim, he goes out of the Kodesh Kodashim and he's involved in the Aktorah of the aisle of the Kohen Gadol and the aisle of the Am, and he's wearing now bigdei zah. He'll finish the Avod of the day with the Tomid Shel Bein Arbayim, and then he has a Kiddush Shishi when he takes off his bigdei zah, and you're left with three tefillahs. One tefillah before the donning of bigdei zah for the Tomid, another tefillah for taking off the bigdei zah, putting on the bigdei lovan to enter into the Kodesh Kodashim, and then he goes out and he does in bigdei zah the Elo ve'ela Am, and that's Gandik. That's this. That's finito. All he had was three tefillos. Is lefichach hitel hakosav es hakrovas Elo ve'ela Am shehi avodas chutz bein aktoras ve'azos lebein hotzas hakafa machta. In other words, we're not going to implement all the avodas bifnim in one fell continuous swoop, but rather we're going to require that the Kohen Gadol leave the Kodesh HaKadoshim before completing his avodah, meaning before Hotzos Kafu Machta, go out, switch into bigdei zav with another tefillah, and when he finishes the Elo V'Ela Am, now and the Tomid Shel Bein Arbayim, now he's ready to take off his bigdei zav, put on his bigdei lovan, and go back into the Kodesh Kadosh for another. We need another tefillah. So we've in effect jacked up the tefillos from 3 to 5. Lefichach hitil hakosav es hakrovas Elo ve'ela Am shehi avodas chutz bein haktores v'azos levein hotzas hakafa machto idei sheyilbash hakohen bigdei zav lakrovas Elo ve'ela Am uliachar mikan yachsav yilbash bigdei lovan lotzas kafu machto. Bofen zeh matzinu od shtei tfilos and shtei alvishos and he says v'arba kiddushim echad lepshitas bigdei lovan sheni lelefishas bigdei zav shlishi lepshitas bigdei zav urevi lelefishas bigdei lovan nimtzal lefi cheshbon zeh chamesh tfilos v'asar kiddush. So the reason, the proof that we have to implement the avod shalom keseder aksuvim is from the fact that we need to get to that magic number of 5 tefillos. Now, In this parsha of Avodas Yoma Kippurim, the Kohen Gadol, it says v'rachatz with regard to Levishas big day Lavan. Notice before he goes into the Kodesh Kadoshim, the Torah commands him to do a tevilah, and he's going to take off his big day zav, and put on his big day love, and he needs tevilah. Only then can he go into the Kodesh Kadosh. Now, when he goes out to the Azara for the purpose of Akrovas Elo ve'Elam, again the Torah says v'rachatz. That's pasuk Chav Daled. V'rachatz. We were focused on the Sefer. Let's go back to the beginning of the pasuk. V'rachatz es b'sor b'mayim v'lavash es b'gadav. He's now putting on his big day zav, and he requires a rachatz b'sor b'mayim, a tevilah. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa. Rabbi Yehuda, minayin lechamech tevilos v'asar kiddushin shetovel kohen gadol umekadish bo biyom, meaning biyom HaKippurim. Almud Lomar, the pasuk says, and these are these two psukim that we said were out of sequence. Uba Aaron el oil moed upashat es big day abad. V'rachatz es b'sor b'mayim v'makom kadosh v'lavash es b'godav v'yotza v'yosa es olasa v'es olasa am v'chipur b'ado b'yad om. From these psukim, we see that when he goes from the avodas hapnim of the Ketores and Azos hapnimios and the shiluach hasoyer, and now he goes out to the avodas chutz of hakrovas elo v'el ha'am, is ha lomadito shekol amshanami avoda lavoda ton tefillah. In other words, when the Kohen Gadol finishes avodas pnim and he takes off his big day lavan and now he dons his big day zav, the Torah says he needs a tevilah. And why is that? Because any time that he changes his begadim, he needs a tevilah. Now, let's say he finally finishes his avodas chutz, and he still has to anticipate going into the Kodesh Kodashim one last time, and therefore he has to take off his big day zav and put on his big day lavan. He needs another tevilah. So the machayev of tevilah now is the shini begadim, and that applies not only when he goes into the Kodesh Kodashim to do the avodas pnim, all those avodas that he does in the Kodesh Kodashim, but it also applies in the other direction when he changes his begadim from big day lavan, and he's going to do the avodas chutz of elo el ha'am or whatever it might be, and now he needs another levishas begadim, in this case levishas big day zav, and that transition from big day lavan to big day zav generates a chiyuv of tevilah. Amar Rebbe, this is still the same brisa. Minayin lechamesh tevilos masora kiddushim shetovel kohen gadol mekadish bo bayom. And we just saw in the beginning of this brisa that Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, said that we're going to derive it from these two psukim, because it says uba kohen, and then it says v'rachatzes b'soro b'mayim, which means that when he changes his begadim from lavan to zav, he requires a tevilah. Rebbe has a different source. Shenemar, and now we go back to the beginning of the parsha, and the Torah says, "B'zos yavo Aaron al hakodesh b'par ben bakar lechatos v'yayil yola sones bad kodesh yilbash u'michnas bad yol b'soro," etc., etc. And then it says, "V'rachatz b'mayim es b'soro u'leveisham." Says Rebbe, let's take a look carefully at pasuk Dalet. It says, "Sones Bad Kodesh Yilbash, Mitzvah say Bad Yom Sor, B'Yavnei Bad Yachkor, Mitznefes Bad Yisnov, Big Day Kodesh Hem, V'Rachatz B'Saro Es Hamayim Ulevei Shah. This pasuk is describing the Levishas Big Day Lavan, which the Kohen Gadol wears when he comes into the Kodesh Kadoshim through the Ruach Avodas Pnim. He's completed already his Avodas Chutz of the Korban Tamid. So again, he's going in to do the Avodas Pnim in the Kodesh Kadoshim, and he's putting on his Big Day Lavan right after he finishes the Tamid. So clearly the Torah is now requiring V'Rochatz B'Sor B'Mayim on his way in to the Kodesh Kadoshim. Holamadito Shekol Mishanim Avoda Levoda Ton Tefillah. And how do we know that this is always true whenever he changes Begad? Maybe it's only when he's wearing his Big Day Lava to go with him. The Omer Big Day Kodesh Hev, and those are three extra words. Shahukshu Kol Begadim Kulam Zelazeh, which means that Shem Shalavishas Big Day Lavan, he needs Tvila before he enters into the Kodesh. So too Bilavishas Big Day Zav, he needs Tvila. Big Day Kodesh. So again, the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rebbe is that where Rabbi Yehuda puts all the emphasis on Pasuk of Gimel, where the Torah says in Pasuk of Gimel that he's taking off his Big Day Bad on exiting the Kodesh Kadoshim, he's putting on his Big Day Zav, and then the Torah says, V'Rochatzis B'Saro B'Mayim. And Rebbe says, no, there's no need to derive it from that. Just look at the very beginning when he dons his Big Day Lavan to enter into the base Kodesh HaKadoshim, and the Torah says, V'Rachatz B'Mayim. Okay, now the Brisa says that let's go through the calculation of the 5 tefillos, whether it's according to Rabbi Yehuda or Rebbe. Chamesh avodos hen. 5 times during Yom Kippur did the Kohen Gadol change from avodas chutz to avodas pnima, or vice versa. And every single time he changes Gadim, he needs a tefillah before he puts on the new set of garments. So how do we know that there are 5? Eluhain. Number 1, Tamid Shel Shachar, the Big Day Zav. So he needs a tefillah before he starts the day when he takes off his Big Day Chol and puts on his Big Day Zav for the Tamid Shel Shachar. Number 2, Avodas Hayom, the Big Day Lavan. Now he's going to enter the Kodesh Kadoshim for the Ketores, the Hazah, and he needs to put on his Big Day Lavan. So again, he's going to require tefillah. He finishes in the Kodesh Kadoshim, goes out, Elo Li'ela Am, and puts on Big Day Zav, again a tefillah. So that's number 3. Number 4, he goes back into the Kodesh Kadoshim to be motzi, to take out the kafu mach, then he needs to again put on his Big Day Lavan. And finally, Tamid Shel Bein Arbayim, the Big Day Zav. Right, so this is a little bit confusing to me because I thought that the Talmud Shel Ben Arbayim would come before the Hotzas Machta. I made a mistake. So let me stand corrected. After the Hotzas Kafu Machta, when he's wearing the big day Lavan, he's inside the Kodesh Kodashim, he comes out, and now he's ready for the Talmud Shel Ben Arbayim, the last carbon of the day, which he's going to perform in big day Lavan, and that's going to require him when in big day Zav, and that's going to require him when he changes from his big day Lavan to big day Zav, a fifth Tvila. Nimtza Shabiyom HaKippurim Yesh Chamesh Shinuyei Avodot V'Limed HaKosuv, which again, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is the pasuk V'Rochatz B'Sar V'Mayim. According to Rebbe, it's the pasuk V'Rochatz B'Sar V'Mayim. That's at the beginning of the parsha. That Kol Shini Avoda Ton Tvila. Okay.